All they're trying to do to make the world a better place is retarded, and I'm going to prove it to you. You look at climate change. We try to use windmills and solar energy, which is totally fine. And you look especially at pollution. And then you see countries like in Europe, especially in Europe, that really look so their people don't put too much shit into the ocean and somewhere else and shit like that. You know about Teflon, how there was chemicals they had to use to make the non-stick frying pans. And those chemicals were washed out after the process and went into the groundwater and everywhere else from there. It's all over the world and everyone has this chemical in them, which isn't that good, but to some certain extent, it's not. It doesn't kill you instantly. So we have problems with pollution. We have problems where just general problems where you would think, oh, that's normal. It always happened. One person kills the other one because of jealousy, envy, because of anger, whatever the fuck, political reasons. You would think that's totally normal. You'd think it's totally normal that wars have been going on forever, since there was civilization, since there were tribes where people got together and another bunch of people got together and one attacked the other to gather the resources. You'd think that's totally normal. Well, what if I told you that all of this wouldn't have to happen and the solution is extremely simple? It is. First of all, let's look so that we can have a comparison at iodized salt. Why is there iodine in salt? People, for a long, long time, have always had big fat lumps on their throat called goiters, where they just grew a big fat thyroid gland because there was too much thyroids, T3 and T4 or something like that, coming from the pineal gland into the thyroid thing, which then would produce something else. Or the thyroid produced T3 and T4 and the pineal gland was sending something else. It doesn't really matter. But iodine somehow made it that this worked normally. Like it works normally in everyone you see around you today. There's no one running around with big fat lumps on their throat. Like going back to here, they had issues in the military because people had big fat lumps and they couldn't close their uniforms. And that was the number one reason, apparently, the number one medical reason why some people weren't taken up into the military in the US. And then in Switzerland, as far as I know, in Switzerland, someone found out that iodine helps with that. It makes the thyroid function normally. You don't get any lumps. And an effect next to not getting any fucking big lumps on your throat was that the IQ of people in America went up by 15 points. That's a whole fucking lot. If you are trying to increase your IQ by playing instruments, Google says you can get like 4, 5, 6, 7 points, something like that. Or by doing the thing with wool, stricken, I don't know the English word right now. That's where you can maybe get some IQ points. But the best way to be smart is to eat iodine. Even have it in milk, because when they clean the cows and the equipment which they use to milk the cows, they use cleaner which has iodine in it, which disinfects it or something, I don't know. And that also gets into milk. And we can be glad that we drink milk because there's iodine in it and we need it. We need like 150 micrograms a day. In beans you get 3.5 micrograms per 100 grams. In salt you get 5,000 micrograms per 100 grams. something like that. In seaweed, it's 2.7 thousand. Seaweed and salt, not in usual salt, but in iodized salt, you get enough. And it's in salt. They put it into salt because everyone has to eat salt. And salt is something where you can't eat too much. If you eat too much salt, you're gonna puke and get sick or whatever. So you can't get iodine poisoning from eating iodized salt. So it was a big plan to make the world better, sane again, by putting iodine into salt so they don't have any big fucking lumps on their throat. And as a really nice side effect, they got smarter, way smarter. So what is it? It's a disruptive thing. Disruptive technologies, so to say. So you have a graph. Let's make a graph here. That's the time axis. That's the progress axis. So when you look at things we do nowadays, like making rules, making politics for pollution, electrical cars, making rules about that you shouldn't kill someone, that abortion is bad, that anything is bad, and you still see people shooting Charlie Kirk, for example, or the Nazis killing the Jews, somebody else killing people they think are Nazis. Like, people always fucking wage war and kill each other. So, and that's also not an IQ issue. It's an issue about morals and your psyche, how you think, and how easily you are possessed by, let's say, evil spirits, for the sake of putting it plainly and making some visuals for this type of thinking. So, and something disruptive like putting iodine in salt was like, you had some treatments for goiters and it worked. Maybe it got a little bit better over time, but putting iodine in salt was like going here. Fucking instantly it changed. Everything changed, everything got better. There's almost no iodine efficiency in the world. It's getting worse now again because people drink soy milk and almond milk and shit like that. Not because they drink that, but because they don't drink normal milk, and because normal milk, which would have iodine in it because of cross-contamination, good cross-contamination in this case, and also because for some reason people say, oh no, salt with iodine doesn't taste so good, salt with iodine is shit. I don't know where to get that from. You need iodine, and they say you can get it by eating other foods. Well, yeah, you can, but you can't put seaweed onto everything you're cooking. Also, there's double as much iodine in salt, which is probably better, and you don't need as much. You probably don't want to eat 100 grams, 200 grams of seaweed or anything like that. Or even, whatever, fuck it. So, we have disruptive solutions to increase the progress of the whole of mankind rather easily. Well, what could we do about all the problems in the world? Where you think, oh no, we have leaders that are totally insane, like Trump or Viktor Orban or Ursula von der Leyen, where people go into politics and one group says those people are insane, the other group says those people are insane. It's going on like that forever and ever and ever. It's like goiters. We always thought big fat lumps on your throat are normal somehow. There's regions where people have goiters. It just happens like that. There's regions where people are really stupid. It happens like that. It's just normal. What are you supposed to do about it? Well, at some point you find something like iodine deficiency. You find out it's that, and you put iodine into salt, and it's gone. It's all gone. Whoosh. All the iodine deficiencies are gone. People don't get big fat lumps. And we can live happily ever after with way more IQ. Is war normal? Is killing each other normal? Is men hitting women normal? Is women going crazy on men normal? Is any of this normal? Well, it is normal. It has happened forever. War has happened forever. People killed each other forever. It never stops. Totally normal, like big fat lumps on your throat. Well, there actually is something we haven't tried yet. There is something that's simple, not really big, in the stage where you implement it. It isn't too much work. Not as much work as, or it doesn't cost as much as having big fat atomic rockets, bombs, so that other countries don't try to kill you with their big fat atomic bombs. We put all our resources into tanks, into soldiers, into big fat bombs, total destruction. It's you have to laugh about it, seriously. It's unnecessary. It's really unnecessary. You can just put psychological education into school. The school is the carrier, like salt. School is the same as salt in this regard. So you have salt plus iodine. Amazing. What do we have in school? The school is the carrier. Everybody has to go to school at some point in their life, at least in the Western world, or at least in most parts of the Western world. And everybody has to eat salt, like everybody. And salt is, in this regard, the same as school. It's a carrier. It's like the car that brings packets from Amazon or whatever the fuck. And now we put something in school. Psyche education. And it does work like that. It works like a charm. It would work like a charm. If you look at the statistics, or better said, at studies, where people with schizophrenia and psychosis, or at least schizophrenia, were taught psychological education, so they had more idea about what's going on with their minds and with their thinking and with their worldview. Bad effects of schizophrenia went down like 50%. I could open it up right now, but it exists. You can, and it's a rather easy point. You don't really have to prove it. When you educate people about something, they know way more about what's happening to them, so to say, and they can get along with it. They can get better. It's that easy. If you remember when you were a kid with your parents and you went to the supermarket, what the fuck did you know about the supermarket? There was shiny things, food everywhere. There was bottles of alcohol. There were sweets you knew from home. And there were price tags. And there was language. There was words. Weird symbols you couldn't understand because you're like this big and you don't know what's happening to you. Because you didn't have any math education. You didn't know the ABC. You don't know what your father is doing with the cashier. You don't know what he's giving her so that he can take the products home with you. You don't know anything about it. You lay down in the supermarket, you kick and scream, you want the toy and whatever the fuck. You go into Walmart, you have no fucking idea, you have no clue what's going on. That's where we are right now. After you go into school and learn maths and the ABC, and you know about all that stuff, we all have a common ground from which we can build supermarkets, we can build financial systems, we can build companies. We need the common ground which every human develops anyhow in his life, which is language. But then everybody goes into school, so that not only a few rich people like back then had education in maths and biology and language reading and writing. We had scribes there was like a bunch of people who could write and read, and a whole lot of people who can just talk. And there wasn't a lot of people who could do basic maths, but now we have, because we put it into school and we build up a common ground where we each can build from there. Well, if you look at what's going on in the world with all the wars and all the conflicts, and how one political party is, so to say, waging war with another one, and don't really get to a consensus, can't really synthesize their points. Like, you have the far right and the far left, and they can't come to a common conclusion that would finally get something to run, like make anything better about the world. You look at that and then you think to yourself, how is that possible? You can talk to someone else, someone in your family, for example, and get to a common ground sometimes. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes one says A, the other one says B, and you can't really combine it together. But then you'll still live on, ideally, and you build from there, and you just notice, hey, that person is a little bit different than me. We can still get along. Well, that's a kind of understanding that some people have, but not everyone. Just like back then when we had a few people who could read, write, and do maths, we nowadays have just a few people who understand society or psychology especially enough so that they don't go mad, that they don't kill anybody. There's lots of people who don't do anything extremely stupid like killing someone. And there are people who do, though. And there's still a lot of people. That's way more than we need. Way more people that kill each other and deal with stupid things. Way more than we need. And it's not like you can put every single one of them into prison. But there's something you can do. You put psychological education into school. Like you put iodine into salt. And all those things go away. Most probably. If you look at goiters, the lumps on your throat, they're basically all gone. You just need a carrier that everyone goes through, like school. Then you put maths into school, and suddenly you can build supermarkets, and you can have farmers. You can have random people that grow up to be inventors and make new equipment for farming. And now suddenly almost everyone has food, at least in the Western world. And things do get better. Now, what should be the point of the psychological education? Brainwash yourself before someone else does it. You get brainwashed everywhere. You even brainwash yourself in a bad way often. You get politicians who tell you this and that. You get scientists who tell you this and that. And things come out at some point where you notice that's not really true what was said to you, what people told you. When I look back at Ignaz Semmelweis, This is the guy we can thank for washing our hands. Can you imagine a world where people don't wash their hands? Just like with iodine salt. Before there was iodine in salt, 1 in 600 babies were born dead in Switzerland. And after that, after you put it in salt, it was 1 out of 3,100 or something like that. And Semmelweis noticed in his clinic, he was a doctor, that when the kids were born by the help of nurses, most of the time they were fine. The mothers didn't die. But when the doctors helped birth the children, more often than with the nurses, the mothers died. He looked at it and he came to the conclusion that it wasn't so good that the doctors went from opening dead bodies and things like that directly into birthing a child with unwashed hands and then touch all the body parts of the woman, because illnesses transmitted from the hands, which seconds ago were in dead bodies and are now in the vagina of a woman, and that killed women. Ignaz Semmelweis noticed it and had a rather simple conclusion: wash your hands. As far as I know, he told people to wash their hands with chlorium, and that would have worked. But the doctor said he's fucking insane. Like, why should we wash our hands? That's stupid. And it went on like that for 30 years. There wasn't much knowledge back then about bacteria and viruses and things like that, about microscopic things on your hand. There wasn't much knowledge about that. So they didn't really see a point in washing hands. And so for 3 decades on, they kept killing kids, or like 1 decade, whatever, for a really big bunch of years. And someone already knew what's going on, and he told them, and they said he's stupid. And at some point he lost his mind. He fell into deep depression, was sent to the psychiatric hospital, and died 2 weeks later. They don't know if he got killed there or abused, or he died of natural causes, so to say. But that happened, and he just told people to wash their hands. And we need the equivalent to that for our psyche. Washing your hands is for your body, so you don't transmit bacteria and stuff like that to other people. Now, you do transmit psychological bacteria and viruses, ideologies that really don't make the world a better place, through coming in contact with other people. They transmit ideologies onto you, you transmit ideologies onto them. You always do that. You instill ideas, you get ideas instilled in you, and you don't really ever look at yourself or someone else and think, I mean, you do, but you don't do it to a point where it's good. Like, you can wash your hands with water, but it doesn't really get rid of all the bacteria. You need soap. So, and the soap, in this case, is psychological education. And when you wash your psyche, when you brainwash yourself before someone else does it, and someone infects you with their ideologies and ideas, but you wash your brain at home, so to say, and then you notice, oh fuck, if I think that through, what I've been told by that person, if I concentrate on that for a moment, I probably go to a really dark place where I don't want to be. So the point being, we have to teach people how to wash their own psychological hands all day, like regularly. Like, you wash your hands when you get home from being in the city and touching all kinds of shit in the train and stuff like that. You get in contact with people all day, and you get touched by how they look, like that, how they feel, how they make you feel when you look at them. You get all this shit into your system, and you need to find a way to wash it out or to put it into a container so you can deal with it. Well, and that would easily be done if, like we put iodine in salt, we just put psychological education into school. As said, people with schizophrenia were helped by getting psychological education about what's happening to them, because now they had a container, now they had ideas they can hook onto so they can explain to themselves what's going on. And when we can explain to ourselves what's going on in the world, when we understand the maths and the reading and writing stuff which you need to go into a supermarket or build one, you don't lie on the floor like a kid anymore who doesn't know what's going on around them, but you see all the things that are going on in our heads and the heads of others, and the spirits and ghosts you can see in everyone. You finally know not all, but way more than you know now about what's going on. You don't have to be a hugely intelligent math professor who does quantum physics all day. You just need to learn the basics: division, addition, subtraction, multiplication. You just need the basics of math to get through life, to deal with other people, to have people be able to deal with you, because you all have a common ground, a common understanding of maths and language, of reading and writing, things like that. But you can read stuff, you can write stuff, you can hear things, you can see things which you don't really understand. You can see symbols that you don't really understand, like a tortoise. From some days ago, I dreamt about a tortoise in, what do you call it? In the roof. I had a dream where I was in a rooftop with some kind of tour guide who showed us, or we found together in the roof, a tortoise. And I was like, why the fuck do I dream of tortoises now? Well, there are symbols, and oftentimes you don't understand them. Nowadays you have AI. You can ask it, what does it mean? You can Google it, what does it mean? We all have symbols of Jesus around, but what does it all mean? Well, let's go to the basics from here. Why do you dream? Does it make any sense? Do your dreams make any sense whatsoever? Honestly, at this point, it feels like a really stupid question. As we know from looking at the world, looking at Darwin and things like that, things evolve. We evolve ourselves to get better accustomed to nature, better accustomed to the things going on around us, better accustomed to the tools we have. Things evolve. Why wouldn't our brains, our unconscious, our psyche, why wouldn't it evolve in a way so that it does something for us? Why would we evolve for millions of years into what we are today and just get random pictures in our head at night? Why wouldn't they mean anything? It doesn't make any sense. Why wouldn't dreams mean anything? Why wouldn't your intuitions mean anything? Why wouldn't your stomach guide you to things that you're supposed to be guided to? Well, it doesn't make any sense. Dreams don't make any sense, and your intuition doesn't make any sense if you can't really put your finger on it. If you think in a logical way that doesn't really get you to the thought or the enlightenment, so to say, of where you are supposed to get with that intuition. But you can look at dreams. There is nowadays a lot of literature on how you can deal with dreams. People have always dealt with their dreams in the past time. And there's a lot of knowledge about it. You can go to Jung, you can go to Marie-Louise von Florence, and probably a whole bunch of other thinkers that I haven't read at this point. I don't know at this point. But there is knowledge about our psyche that helps you getting along with yourself and others and in this world. When you look at writer's block, for example, or artists that get to a point where they don't know what they're supposed to do anymore, where they get depressed or don't know what to paint, have a blank piece of paper in front of them and don't know what to write, what to say, what to do. You lay down at night, you dream, you see images, hopefully remember them. I am really rather bad at remembering my dreams for some reason, but it does actually get better the more you put your thought to it, the more you try to notice and remember them, the more you deal with them, the more you can remember. At least that's how it worked for me. So you get into writer's block, you get into artist's block, whatever you call it, and then you dream something. You see pictures, you see a tortoise, you think, why the fuck do I see tortoises now? And then you actually have some material to write about. You can ask yourself, you can just start writing, why did I dream of a tortoise? Why was it in the roof? Why was it there? And what does it all mean? And you have material. And so, at least for that, and for way many other reasons, dreams are something that helps us. It's trying to help us. But for some reason, people don't really seem to give a fuck about their ideas, about their dreams. Ideas, dreams, intuitions, they get all these noises. They think it's noises from their head that just are some weird shit they don't have to think about. And that does happen too. And you're not really supposed to just follow all your intuitions, like thinking. That's when you get into psychosis, for example, when you think you're Jesus and things like that, and you're on top of the world. Claude, the AI thing, said psychosis is when you don't think of something anymore as, oh, I noticed something, but psychosis then is when you say, I am the one who noticed this. I am the one who came up with that conclusion. That's when you get inflation. That's what Robert L. Moore would call it probably. It's also what Jung calls it. Inflation and psychosis, they're related, if not the same. It's when you put yourself on top of all that thing. On top of all. Well, so the point being is, the big question we now have is, what would you put in psychological education? Why did I even get to that conclusion? If you look at school nowadays, you have maths, you have biology, you have reading, writing, you have language, you have music, you have all kinds of things, you have sports. But do you see any curriculum, anything where you are told anything about your psyche, anything about the spirit? Well, there's one thing: religion. We all have religion, religious education in school. Nowadays, if you don't go into religion education, in Austria at least, you get ethics. So, you know, the other things, biology, sports, maths, that's kinda bodily. It doesn't really teach you something about the psyche. It doesn't really teach you about the anatomy of your mind, of the immaterial things that are going on. Well, maths isn't really material, so to say, but I am guessing you know what I mean. The only thing that really gets into your spirit is religion. And the problem with religion is that the church had to say for years what religion means, what the religious material means. You have Islam, you have Christianity, you have Hinduism, you have all of these types of religions, you have all of these stories that could mean one thing or the other, stories that mean a lot of things, like tales, for example. I have the book here, but I'm not bothering to take it out. Tales from Brothers Grimm, Hansel and Gretel, all those kinds of things, which also albums. If you listen to music, sometimes it means that thing for you, like Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon, and 5 years later you listen to it again, or the next day you listen to it again, and it kind of means something different to you. It kind of makes you feel in a different way, like fables and religious stories. But the church and all the individuals in the church have their own kind of individual idea of what it all means. And you're supposed to pick it up like that. You're not really there to question it. If you look at philosophers back then, like Kant, Spinoza, I think Kant wasn't really bothered by the church so much, but Spinoza, Descartes, church really tried to fuck them over. They really said, like, those Spinoza and all these people are crazy. Like, they are doing blasphemy. All what they say is it's bullshit. And so there's something I heard about Spinoza. I think it's Spinoza, which was really nice. There was this king, and people went to the king and said, this Spinoza guy is fucking retarded, he's going crazy, he's blasphemous, he doesn't believe in God and things like that. And the king said, well, if it should be true that God has any problems with Spinoza, he should God should deal with Spinoza himself. He doesn't have to intervene. That's kind of cool. And that's what it should be like. So the point being with religion is that was some kind of spiritual, psychological common ground we had for all these years in the groups we accumulated in. You know, Christianity, Islam, all those kind of groups, you have religion. Heidegger said, for example, but not just him, that was a point made long ago, that everyone has their religion. We have our ecological religions, we have our political religions, or you could call it ideologies, but it is kind of religion. You have some idols, you have some gods you follow, so to say. Like, you think it's true that when you go into work daily and you show up and you put all your energy into that, you somehow grow old with money and can buy a house. But also that idol fell. You can't really do that anymore as you could back then. It's not as easy anymore. It's just thinkings we have that you don't really hold up. And just like that, religion also has symbols that change over time. Jung noticed that that's probably the best thing you can do to learn. That's surely the best thing you can do to learn anything about yourself and psyche and religion and what's going on in the world, so that you can go into church and understand what they're saying, at least to a certain extent. Read Jung and Marie-Louise von France. Maybe Robert L. Moore for a more secular, a little bit more scientific kind of view. When thinking about mental illness and things like that, he's really interesting in those points about inflation and narcissism. So, religious symbols and words change their meaning over time. For example, if you look at the etymology of any kind of a little bit more interesting word, like phenomena or extroversion, introversion terms that stem from Jung, you notice how they change their meaning. When they get into this society and people talk with each other and use those terms and symbols in kinds of ways that don't exactly go along with their original meaning, they kind of change their meaning. Extroversion for Jung just meant that you were more focused on the things outside of you. In philosophy, there's this subject-object thing where the one perceiving something, the acting entity, like you, for example, is the subject, and what you are looking at is the object. And extroversion, there's more to it, but that's basically it. When extroversion is when you're more about the subjective feelings that come up. When you look at a loudspeaker, for example, a speaker, it's about the things you look at what's going on in you. What does it mean to you? You can think about plugging in your guitar. You get all kinds of visions you could do with a speaker. And sorry, that's introversion. Extroversion would be that the object is more interesting. It's not really something you can totally put your finger on. And everyone is kind of an ambivert, like extrovert and introverted. The point is, those things change their meaning. And if you look at the etymology, which is one of my favorite things to do, is to look at the etymology of words, you really get oftentimes you really get a way different sense of what it actually means than the sense you have when you just ask other people what it means nowadays and what it seems like it means nowadays. So symbols also change their meaning. For example, Jesus. Jung said Jesus was the symbol of the self. So you have this ego, which is a complex. Let's explain a complex. A complex is a bunch of psychological entities. You have intuitions, you have things you thought, things you think, things that are rumoring around in your head. For example, words like knife or blood, they could force a bigger reaction than other words, like book, for example, which showed Jung in his experiments that there was something he called a complex. It's where the word knife instills all kinds of associations in you. You have all kinds of association to the word knife, and when it's said, when you're confronted with the word, you take longer to answer, for example, and that shows that there is something there. That's what we would call a complex. A bunch of things that go together, like the ideas about knives you have, how many paintings you did about knives, how often you use the knife, how you cut yourself with a knife. There's all kinds of things that aren't even really in your that aren't really perceivable for you in the moment, because they don't have to be in the conscious part of yourself, but they could be in the unconscious part of yourself. Those things bundle up like building blocks, like you have a ball, you have this block, and you have a triangle, and you have all kinds of stuff that's here and there. Some intuitions, some thoughts, some memories, other associations that come up. And when those things clamp together, so to say, in your psyche. Those things get together, and suddenly you build something out of it. You have you put them on top of each other, and you kind of build a thing, and that's a maybe childish explanation of what a complex is. But things bundle up in your head, and that's also what's your ego, your I complex. Your I complex is a bunch of things that go together, ideas about yourself, what you think and know about yourself. Those things bundle up, and he said that's where your consciousness is coming from. You are a complex of all kinds of things that go together and stick together, that attract each other like atoms. And that's from where out you are perceiving the world. That's your ego, your I complex. This is going a little bit deeper, and it doesn't really matter so much to what we are trying to say. But that's something that's good to know. You can look. That's also this from here. We get a good idea of how to make sense of things. If you just look at individual facts, you look at this, then you forget about the triangle, you move over to this, then you forget about that, move over to this. That's kind of going in a linear way, in a linear fashion of looking at and remembering facts, for example. But when you look at all those things together and you gather information from here and from there, what does the blue side say about tortoises? What does the red side say about tortoises? What do experts and professionals say about tortoises? What does your experience say about tortoises? What happened to you on the beach when you looked at tortoise eggs? Things like that. When you take all of that together, it's hard to make a conscious effort to put those things into place in your head, in your mind. But you kind of circle around a bunch of things and try to put them together to something you don't even really have in your head fully, in the conscious part of your head. It's not something you can look at most of the time, but there's something there, a bunch of information, and you kind of circumambulate, if you can say it like that, around it, and you go from here to there and here to there, and you go to the middle, and at some point you find a conclusion, or you have a bunch of knowledge bundled up in a place in your head, in your mind maybe, where the neurons just, which makes total sense, right? Your neurons are connected to each other, and when you build strong pathways between those neurons, from thinking about tortoises and then thinking about chairs, for example, if you do that all the time, if it makes sense for you to think about tortoises and chairs all the time, the pathways get stronger and are more easily activated. And so you think about a tortoise and you think about a chair. It's basic behaviorism from Pavlov and his dogs. You ring a bell and the dog thinks, hey, I'm getting food. Or you ring a bell and the dog gets an electric shock. And then you ring the bell, the dog doesn't get the electric shock anymore, but he still has the reaction. You know? You can put those things together and get to a point. What I was trying to explain was the self. How Jesus is supposed to be the symbol of the self. Well, you have that I complex, that ego, and that's kind of your personality. You react strongly to talks about nature. You like eating tomatoes, for example. But the self is all that you are. You can explain the ego because you can see it, or other people can see it and make sense of it, write it down, put it into words, put it into pictures. But the self is all of your personality, which includes things you don't know about, things that are in the unconscious. And here at this point, it's good to explain what Freud thought about the unconscious in comparison to Jung. Basically, one of the points where they didn't get along was Freud thought that the unconscious stems from the conscious. So that you put things into the back of your head all the time and you don't really want to remember them, or you are not able to remember them all the time. Would be crazy if you could remember every single second of your life. I mean, there are some people who do that, right? But the unconscious would be there. It stems from the conscious, and things just get to the back of your head because of trauma or things like that, whatever. But Jung said the conscious stems from the unconscious, so the other way around, which to me makes much more sense. Because what are dreams? How does all of that work? Jung thought the unconscious is autonomous. It does things on its own. And when we get to dreams here, it kind of makes sense. Who is taking all those pictures? Who is putting those things together? Who put the tortoise in the roof? Why do you see that? You've never seen that roof, but for some reason you now see it when you're asleep in your dreams. Who put all these things together? Which could scare someone. I mean, the thought of it is kind of scary, that there's something in your head, in your psyche, that makes things alongside of you. Like, you're not the only one in your head, but there's this unconscious that does things. But you can live with it. There's good ways to live with it. Everything has a good side and a bad side to it. Like drugs or anything you can consume, the dosage makes it poisonous. If you don't have enough iodine, you get big fat lumps. If you have too much iodine, you probably die, I don't know. And it's the same with everything. It's a basic point. Everyone knows that. That's a chemical knowledge for hundreds of years. So everything is kind of on a spectrum. That's also what Jung said about psychosis, that you don't really find anything weird in psychotic people if you look at everyone else in comparison. It's just that people you would call normal think of whatever really comes whatever really pushes itself to the front and makes itself visible in psychotic patients, like having a Napoleon complex or whatever. Normal people do have that Napoleon complex, but they are like here or here. It's not to a degree where you really think about it as an illness. But when you look at psychotic and schizophrenic people, it could be that it's like right here. And then it really shows itself and makes someone look unnormal. So things exist along a degree. I mean, you don't even... I should also say, looking at things like that, you don't have to think like that. You can say that's total bullshit. You can say that's untrue. But those are ways of thinking that really help to find conclusions in this space. Many people call Jung an esoteric and occultist, and that's kind of a bad word oftentimes, or at least they use it in a bad way and say that's you can't really gather any knowledge from those people because they were weird. Also, point about etymology and weird. Look at the etymology of weird. It's pretty interesting. It stems from destiny, apparently. I think weird meant destiny back then, which is a cool thing to think about. And just like that, You don't have to say weird means destiny nowadays. It obviously doesn't. Weird means weird, something else, something crazy, for example. But back then, apparently, it meant destiny. Or it didn't. It doesn't really matter. The point is, you get all these kinds of concepts and you try to get results from there. Something esoteric can be esoteric, it doesn't have to be bad. You just have to be able to get results from something that help you in return, or that help the general public, help the general good of the world. And so, kind of like extremism here, where normal people have a Napoleon complex that's about here in degrees, and psychotics may have a Napoleon complex on the very end of the spectrum. It's the same thing in politics. You have the left side and the right side, you have the Democrats and the Republicans. The left side has strong opinions on things right here, and the right side has different kinds of opinions right here on the other end of the spectrum. But it doesn't mean you can't do anything with it. It doesn't mean the right is completely wrong. It doesn't mean the left is completely wrong. But the problem is when those people don't get along. I see a perfect world where Nazis and woke people go into a bar and just talk about what they think and get to conclusions. They synthesize their opinions and get to something you can work with instead of killing each other and beating each other up. And that's the insanity we have to rot out. That's like the Reuters, that's like the big fat lumps on your throat that everybody thought that was normal. And stupid people with 15 IQ points less than later on because of iodine salt. That's just things we think of as normal. Children dying because of iodine deficiency, people being dumb of iodine deficiency, people getting big fat lumps of iodine deficiency. Totally normal, totally normal. Until someone comes along and says, hey, let's put iodine in salt. And suddenly everything gets better, just like that. Or someone comes along and says, hey, wash your hands. And suddenly we get to a whole different degree of mankind where everything's completely different. Well, why would it be normal for people to have wars just because they happen for millions of years? Just because animals fight each other? Just because animals kill each other? Why would it have to be normal? It could be that we're just missing iodine salt. It could be that we're just missing psychological education in school. And the problem with psychology today is that they don't really give a shit about Jung. It's like with the Nazi Keule, or what they say about political discussions and Hitler. There's this kind of silly rule that at some point in a political discussion, Hitler comes up. Hitler is now part of the discussion. At some point, someone is mentioning Hitler. It's the same with psychology. Everything, when someone starts yapping about psychology, at some point, Freud is mentioned. It's always Freud. And I know there's a lot of people who say Jungians can never not complain about Freud, and I'm doing exactly that right now. But I'm not comparing Freud to Hitler, but I'm saying Freud always comes up in psychological discussions, and you don't really get further with him. That's the point where we are in psychology right now. He was kind of mechanistic. He even named one of his children after the name of his mentor, which was Ernst Brücke, I think, who said, no, everything in our head is mechanic. There's no spirit, there's no soul kind of thing. Everything is mechanic, and if we can just understand how the mechanic parts in our heads work, how DNA works and things like that, we will learn everything. We will know everything. But it's way, at least for me and for the maybe creative people generally, for a whole bunch of people, it's way easier and better to think about psychological things in terms of Jung, in terms of spirit, when you just have the premise that there is some kind of immaterial thing that you can't touch, that's not mechanistic, that you can't explain with mechanisms and chemicals. But here is where we are today. Everybody loves Freud. Nobody seems to read Jung too much. Although now, and I really have to say this, there's dumb, shitty social media, new age esotericism posts about Jung that say, this is how Jung made his wishes come true. This is how you can just think things into existence and things like that. Well, that's not really what Jung is about. There is synchronicities, which is really interesting, and to be honest, from my experience, you do have to say synchronicities exist. It's where you are in your head, you are in your psyche. The things that are in your psyche somehow kind of magically, spookily match up with what you experience in the outer world. Like, for example, I drove out with my car and went into the street and heard on the radio the name Detlef. It's a name more common in Germany, I think, not really in Austria. And I thought, Detlef. And I had to laugh and things like that, and thought, Detlef, it's kind of a silly name. I like it, but it's kind of a funny name. But when do you ever hear about Detlef? They talked about a book in the radio where there was a Detlef. And then I drove out of the street, got onto the main street, and 2 cars in front of me, there was this, not car, but the things you sleep in, you know, those things. And it had written on top of it in big letters, Detlef. I was like, what the fuck? When do you ever hear about Detlef? You never. You never do so. And there's way more things like that, but that's one of those things, you know. That's kind of a synchronicity. What do you even do with that? What do you do with reading Detlef? Maybe it's just trying to show you, hey, you are in this world. Some things, everything kind of makes sense when you want it to. Just to get you less neurotic, like feeling less that you don't matter in this world or anything like that. Doesn't matter. The point is, you have to, with everything, it just has to work for you. But what does it even mean that something works for you? Okay, if you don't get depressed too much unnecessarily, if bad things happen less often, like big fat goiters, and if people get higher IQs through iodine, that's probably better. Well, as long as things get better in that kind of way, you can think with any kind of tools, with complex, with degrees and spectrums of degrees and spectrums. It just has to work out in a certain way. If you can't really put your finger onto it and explain it in a rational, logical way, you just have to get a feeling for it. Well, brainwash yourself before someone else does it. Don't get brainwashed, don't get all the viruses and bacteria, those psychological, spiritual viruses and bacteria and ideologies into you that, hey, you have to work your fucking ass off and get cancer from stress and things like that. Maybe you do have to work your ass off sometimes, but you don't have to go this extreme. You can, on the time axis, do it for a certain time, it will work. Or just on the energy axis, so to say, don't go this extreme into working your ass off. Don't work your ass off like you're completely stressed. Just do it a little bit and probably works. The point is, what this should instill in mankind, psychological education in school, that's the most important thing. That's everything is evolving around. from my philosophy. This is what it's about. Psychological in education in school is supposed to make you able to enable you to have a kind of feeling for these kinds of things, for all kinds of things in the world. Should I do this right now? Should I do that right now? Is this a worthy thought? Does this thought help me with my life? Does it help anyone else with their life that's around me? And that's kind of like washing your hands psychologically, like washing your brain. Not in the usual meaning of brainwashing, but in the sense of getting your fingers between the windings of your brain and washing out all those shitty ideas that don't really help you and don't help anyone else, that put you down. And by putting you down, putting everyone around you down, wash out those ideas that don't really make the world a better place. And sometimes you fail, sometimes you do things that don't seem like it made the world a better place, but then it happened. And then you have to think about the now. You're in the now, right now. You're not in 5 minutes ago, you're not in 2 seconds ago, you're not in 5 years ago when you, I don't know, showed your dick in the supermarket or something like that. You're here right now. And I know the rules of society, they don't really line up with being in the now, but it all kind of makes sense, but it's hard to fit together. And that's also why everyone should learn that, why everyone should get 15 IQ points more by putting iodine in salt, why everyone should have a feeling for psychological education, why everyone should wash their hands physically to get off the bacteria and spiritually to get off the ideologies and things like that that make you sick and make everyone else sick. That's the whole point. All those things that don't fit together nowadays, like the law, what people do, what people say and think, people feel, all of those things that don't really fit together nowadays, like a nice puzzle would. Like the left side of politics and the right side of politics. They don't have those ideas to make the other side mad all the time. It's not what it's about for most people. Those people have their ideas and those people have their ideas. They're probably missing a whole bunch of information and the other side is probably missing a whole bunch of information. And when they get together, as long as they don't get into this modus operandi where one starts fighting with the other one, you could get to a kind of synthesis. There's a conflict because one side says that and the other side says that. It's a conflict, that there's heat generating there. There's heat coming up and making you want to fight the other one or making you want to fight each other. But when it isn't like that, you may find a consensus in all kinds of things, not just in politics, in usual everyday things. And when we get to this point where we can notice that we're completely different and that our opinions don't really fit together, but we still talk and talk ourselves out and maybe get to a conclusion at some point, then I think we can make the law, the individual freedom, and everything else you can think about fit together way more nicely. Or even fit together at all. Some things just seem like it's the completely opposite side of the spectrum, but it's just the same. It's the same axis. It's the same spectrum. But someone is right here and the other one is right there. But we could get along. You just have to learn about things like complexes, like the animus and the anima. This pen doesn't really like to work anymore, does it? Animus, anima, shadow, complex, projection. Projections are especially interesting. things like that. You don't have to be an expert on those things, but everyone should have heard about things like those, because they really help you to understand. They really help you to understand. And what you personally can do right now is grab a book of Jung, find a PDF maybe, so you can instantly read something about him. There's not a lot of material on him online, and that's a big problem, I think. It's where you notice that we don't really get in contact with those ideas. When you look at YouTube, there are basically no documentaries about him. It's all old stuff. There's a handful of recordings of Jung talking. It's not a lot, but there's a big bunch of books, and you don't have to understand everything. You don't have to understand the religious parts and symbols. He knew so much that I can't put into my brain, like what the Leviathan means, what Yahweh is, and all kinds of things like that. But the more you read about those things, maybe they come up more in your life, like the self or the ego, and you then, the more you read about it, the more things you remember about those things. And the next time it comes up, you know another thing about that, and it's kind of like a snowball effect where the ball just rolls down the hill, picks up more snow, and at some point you have a big ball of knowledge, a big complex of things about what does the self mean, for example. The snowball rolls down and you pick up all kinds of parts, and suddenly you have a complex from which out you can make sense of things. Where you go into church and you now understand what they're talking about. And you see it in the world when you read Jung. People don't think about things like that. They really don't. But my guess, for which I have some good reasons, my guess is that if this was more of a thing in society, we could eliminate wars and fights. So we could eliminate really bad things like goiters, big fat lumps on your throat, and we could gain a lot. We could synthesize opposing forces, opposing people again and again, because they don't just fight. They don't just really focus on what they think and don't let anything else get into them. They stop fighting, getting angry, and they start going into a productive dialogue, in a dialectic kind of search for the truth. You don't have to read Hegel. You don't have to read the whole of the phenomenology of the spirit. You don't have to know all kinds of things. You just have to, with psychological education, instill a sense of metacognition, a thinking of thinking, to think about your thinking, or and self-reflection, to see, hey, what's going on in your head right now, to recognize what's going on in your psyche. You just have to instill this kind of feeling, like you instill a kind of feeling for maths and for language in children. You have to instill a kind of feeling for their own psyche. It's like, what do you call it when you buy a machine and get those things, the description or this kind of tutorial booklets on how to use the coffee machine. You need to get some kind of booklet for your psyche, for your brain, for your life. How? So you get a little bit of a feeling of what you should do with the coffee machine, what you shouldn't. Like, there are some strict rules. For example, you have to clean your coffee machine every 2 weeks, otherwise it gets moldy and you die, maybe. There's also some strict rules in the psyche and life. Don't kill each other unnecessarily. don't do this and that. There's some dogmas that make some total sense. There's just some holy rules, so to say, that you don't touch. But there's also some kind of feeling, some kind of intuition you develop by reading the tutorial thing for the coffee machine. A kind of feeling you gain from educating yourself about psychology, about your psyche especially. Like we should, like Leonardo da Vinci, you shouldn't. It doesn't really help most of the time when you view of those things as different categories. The arts, poetry, prose, philosophy, psychology, science. When you look at all those kinds, I mean, it's nice to put them into to nicely put them into a place and make it orderly, but you don't really have to. You don't really have to. And so the education on the psyche shouldn't be pure psychology, especially not in the way we have it right now, because it doesn't really help, apparently. Like, people get psychosis from AI, which could be easily prevented by instilling a sense of the psyche in them, and to understand that, hey, you're projecting into these bunch of sentences that appear on a screen that there's a person or something like that. You just have to be aware of what you are doing subconsciously. You don't have to get all those illnesses. You don't have to get all those mental illnesses. If you have more of an idea about how the psyche works, it doesn't have to be this bad. There's men hitting women. We have a big problem in Austria apparently with femicides. And all they talk about is, hey, man, why aren't you saying anything? And why are you hitting your women? And why is this happening? Why is that happening? And they never talk about animus and anima and the shadow and projection. They never talk about that. And then I ask myself, what the fuck? What are you even trying to do if you don't talk about... We're talking about women and men, where men don't really get along with them, apparently. But, you know, in German you say, zum Streiten gehören immer zwei. There's always two people involved in conflicts, at least, you know. I mean, you could further on that point and say that you are also getting into conflict with yourself and all kinds of shit like that. You can really think rather deeply if you have some concepts of those, which you can get back to. But the point being, they don't really talk about things like that, and then they wonder why it just goes on and on and on. What are you supposed to do when laws don't matter anymore, in the heat of a moment where someone hits another person or kills another person? What does the law matter? You can say people who kill someone else will get tortured to death. What does it matter if someone wants to kill someone and doesn't have anything to lose? Will they get stopped by the idea that they will get tortured? They could just kill themselves afterwards, for example. It doesn't matter. You can't make the laws any more strict. You have to instill in the people a sense of community, a sense for those things especially, make you understand way more about all these types of stuff. But then, when you educate a single person, when you wash your hands yourself, when you are the only one who is eating salt with iodine, what does it matter? You can make way more sense about the world. You are the one scribe back in the Middle Ages who knows how to read and how to write, but everyone else around you doesn't. If you're the only one washing your hands, you still get shit from everywhere. You touch things in the drain and you get bacteria and viruses. You get in contact with other psyches and get brain viruses and ideologies instilled in you. If you're the only one washing your hands, it doesn't work. Everybody has to have iodine and salt, or almost everybody. Everybody has to wash their hands nicely. Everybody has to wash their psychological hands with knowing a thing or two about psychology, like everyone knows a thing or two about maths and language. If we don't get to this basic point of this on this common ground, like religion was for us for a long time, if we don't get to a consensus on a common ground, we can't build from there. We can't have any supermarkets if there's like two people who understand maths and language. We can't get anywhere from here. We're just going to keep having wars, more and more people going into psychosis. For some reason, young people get a lot more cancer nowadays than back then. There's all kinds of shitty things happening right now because we don't have a common ground on how to deal with each other. Religion was that for a long time, and it somehow worked a little bit, but also one religion waged war with another religion, just like nowadays. But when we get common ground with those things, it shouldn't be as bad. So the carrier would be school, just like it was with salt. Everyone goes to school and has to learn maths. And so everyone has to eat salt. So you could get iodine from there if you buy iodized salt. And so everyone who goes to school could get psychological education. Education about philosophy, just a little bit. And if you say, oh no, you can't teach kids philosophy and also they're too stupid to understand maths nowadays and language, just ask AI, for example, or think about it for more than just a mere second where you just say, oh, it doesn't work. Think about it a little bit longer. You can make exercises so that children get it. You can make exercises so that children can grasp it more easily. It's not that it's way cheaper than making tanks all the time. It's way cheaper than creating atomic bombs all the time. Like Rory Sutherland said, you can make a train you can increase the speed of a train so that it's there for 5 minutes earlier, or you could just make the train journey way more enjoyable by putting Wi-Fi in there and better seats, maybe something to eat. It's way cheaper. You can gather a whole bunch of engineers to make the train just a little bit faster. At some point you can't make it really much faster, and it gets increasingly complicated. And you have all those kinds of fronts where you're trying to go further. You are having this front where you're trying to increase the speed, and we're kind of like here, and at this point you don't really get much further. It doesn't really work at this point. Here you could need something else that changes perspective altogether. So a disruptive technology, like the invention of the wheel, the invention of the smartphone. It changes the world. Like iodine in salt, it changes the world. Psychological education in school, it would change the world. So you go somewhere else where you haven't really done too much, like here. That's about how much psychology is in the collective consciousness of our zeitgeist, of all in our society. That's about how much we know about psychology. That's about how much of maths we all know. That's about how much of language we all know just by going to school. That's about how much of psychology we know just by going to school. And we could put it right here. And it would change a lot of things. Just think about the people you know that have a kind of feeling for life, for their psyche, for the world. Isn't it much easier for them? Doesn't it seem like they are going through life a little bit better than those who don't understand? And as said, you don't have to be a pro. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to do extreme math stuff. You don't have to be a physicist. You just have to instill yourself. You have to get a little bit of an idea about the topic, just a little bit of an idea of the ghost, of the spirit of psyche, of philosophy, just to get a little bit of an idea. And there's like a bunch of simple points in there, like stoicism, for example, things like that, which help you to confront life and make it more interesting and make it easier, better. It's not a whole bunch of things that are missing, you know. Oh, CO2, and people still pollute the oceans, and Europe is getting better because the people here don't really pollute too much, but in India they still pollute so much, and in China there's so much pollution. Well, the whole structure of society would change if the whole structure of society changed when we put iodine in salt. The whole structure of society would change if we put psychological education into school. And then we can build from there. If you're interested a little more into the topic, I can write down some philosophers, some thinkers that helped me get to this conclusion. Maybe next time I'll talk about psychosis, because I'm an expert by experience, and I also was able to integrate it really nicely into myself by reading Jung and things like that. Well, here's some thinkers I can recommend. On the one hand, Gabor Mate. Gabor Mate is a good way to understand how society is influenced by, he calls it trauma, which is fine, but by your parents and their parents doing something stupid, and then they instill the trauma into their children, those instill the trauma into the next generation, and then into the next, it goes on and on, you know. That's a good point of seeing how those things kind of connect together. Then you have Rory Sutherland. Does this fucking pen work any? Rory Sutherland. From him you can really get a good idea about disruptiveness, about how just changing a tiny word, just doing the tiniest bit of work can change everything in the results. And where you really get a feeling how at some point in a company there has to be a creative idea, a creative person who just does something irrational which changes the whole landscape. You know, it's just read it. He only has one book which is called Alchemy. It's really good. Like, you know, from Gabor Mate I had The Cost of Hidden Stress. When the Body Says No, that's what it's called. Yeah, whatever, I don't want to write it out all the time. Gabor Mate, When the Body Says No, and also In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts. And Rory Sutherland, there's Alchemy, the book. Then you have, I don't know if there's many English translations of his books, but Hartmut Rosa is extremely relevant to this topic. He shows how you are trying to get a feeling for the world. It's his resonance theory. You're trying to be, if you were a guitar string, for example, a guitar string, you would like, you're swinging in some kind of frequency. That's kind of a visual way to explain it. You're in some kind of frequency and you like to get touched by the outside world. He's a rather deep philosopher and pretty rationally oriented. That one's good. Gabor Mate, Rory Sutherland, Hartmut Rosa, also, and especially Carl Jung. And then Marie-Louise von Franz. Marie-Louise von Franz has a lot of great videos online because they they filmed her a lot in a certain period. So there's like 20 hours maybe of material, maybe just 15 hours. So you can get a lot of knowledge from her, and it's also in English. Then Carl Jung, you can also get some English interviews, but there's like not a whole lot there. But you can read Jung, and good books are, for example, Die Beziehungen zwischen dem Ich und dem Unbewussten. I don't know what you would call it in English. The relationship between the I and the unconscious, or the ego and the unconscious. That's the first book I read from him. That's when I finally got to understand him. It does work. It's kind of hard sometimes, but there's material of his that's easier to get into than other materials. And that's one of those that works. Then, what else? Jung. You know, you should really get an idea of archetypes, of complexes. You should really get an idea what dreams can mean and things like that. And then you should look at anima and animus. I think you get a good view on that from Marie-Louise von Franz. From Hartmut Rosa, you just get an idea of what's going on in the world, what's really irrational. His latest book, Constellations and Situations, it's about how we treat things in the world like they are constellations. Like, for example, a cop pulls over a kid with his ride, which is changed illegally. He made it faster illegally, and in a constellative view, the cop would have to force the law on the kid. But when he knows him and he knows his family and thinks, hey, he could actually, maybe he's gonna build it back. I told him he's supposed to build it back. I don't have to make his life more miserable by charging him some money. That's a situational view, when you still get the ability to say, okay, usually that's not how we do it, but let's do it like that. That's where you can put your feeling, your intuition, all of your experience into the situation. But more and more society, especially in bureaucratic societies, goes into the direction of there's no room, there's no space for your own experience, for what you think. This happened, you saw it, and this is the only solution that's allowed. There's no room between where you can say, hey, that's maybe not okay right now. And that's really bad. That's really bad. As soon as things go like that, we lose all of humanity. Like, seriously, that's really bad. So he's good. Those are the good philosophers that I can mention right now. There's way more, but those are the most interesting, and especially interesting is Jonathan Mies. He doesn't have books really, but there is a lot of material on YouTube. For example, a Vice interview for 14 minutes, where you can really get a good idea of how the world could be, how it's. He really is someone who shows you what projections are. In this video, I watched it like 20, 30 times, I don't know. He paints a swastika, for example. Then he says that the man always wants pathos. The man always wants to feel something. He wants to be destroyed, you know. But he doesn't want it. He just wants to paint it, and all those symbols have to get rid of the person. We instill all these kinds of meaning into the symbols and say, hey, that's a bad symbol, that's bad, and blah blah. But that's just a projection you do. It's just a projection that you know about society, what they think about the swastika, and then you say, the swastika means this and this, and this is the symbol of the Nazis, and blah blah. Yeah, well, that's kind of true, but it won't always be. In 200-300 years, or nowadays in Vietnam, for example, it means something completely different. Maybe it's the other way around and things like that, but it won't always mean the same. Things change, but some stick to it, and some really want to see the negativity in symbols and other things and in words. But it doesn't have to be there. It's just you and your projection on what it is, because of the knowledge you have from society and the knowledge you have from studying history and things like that. You get all these kinds. But Jonathan Mies shows how you can just flip the switch and think about things in a different way. It's really kind of hands-on work on the things Jung is talking about when we talk about projections and the shadow and things like that. Jonathan Mies really instills this in a artsy, creative way. A really interesting type of character, kind of guy. Yeah, well, let's leave it at that for now. I have been recording for 1.5 hours. Okay, well, maybe I'll put this into 3 separate parts, and that will be it for now. Thanks a lot.